we have the webinar being recorded. So this is actually already in the consent information as part of the invitation, but we still want to remind everyone that this is being recorded, and if you are not okay with it, you are free to leave the event anytime. So again, welcome from my side. My name is Kai Zhang, and I'm from Martel Innovates. We are a consulting firm located in Switzerland. And today's webinar is our first event, inviting all of you joining to talk about our first major outcome, which is the metrics. So briefly on the agenda, I will give a quick overview of the project, and then we have gladly invited Anne from European Commission, the unit on intelligent interactive technology, digital for culture and education, joining us. And then we will give the floor to Ellen to give us the overview on the metrics, and then we will have the interactive session. And please post your question anytime during the event, and then we will collect our input, your inputs, and then we will facilitate the interactive session. So first of all, the DEL for all actually means digital enhanced learning for all. And then all here, it's important to note that it means for everyone, regardless of their age and gender and socio-economic factors. So we would really want to have a project that is benefiting everybody in the field of education and care for the future for the education. So quickly on the vision, basically we would like to find a unified strategy at the European level, utilizing the digital transformation and digital technology to unleash the power of education, and that hopefully will change the relation between teaching and learning for all, and then introducing our concept of community, and then bringing experts' opinion like yours, and to enrich our digital enhanced learning capacities in Europe. So as you can see here, we have three simple objectives, which is to create a solid knowledge database and developing the sustainable ecosystem. So basically what we're trying to do there is based on the existing initiatives and communities, we gather information in the same place through the DEL for all platform, and together we learn about what are the latest technologies and scientific results that is related to the distance learning field. We gather them so that we can present the idea rather from in a fragmented situation right now. We gather them in our platform to show to all of our stakeholders, and then from there we gather a community where experts or whoever cares about education can come and have a debate on this very relevant issue, and then at the end we develop an agenda, forward-looking agenda that is strategic for digital enhanced learning at a European level. And that's why it comes to our topic today, where we have the metric to be discussed. As you can see in this slide, it's actually at the center of our activities. This is the first version of our metrics. There will be a second and a third version that will be, of course, further enriched, and especially also from your inputs that will be going through methods like surveys, interviews, workshops, and roundtable discussions, so that we engage our experts from the technical fields, from education field, and pedagogical fields, and also policy making as well as legal fields. So all the opinions will be collected, analyzed, and then eventually we developed the Delphi output, where you can see at the top of the screen, which includes best practices, project portfolios, and eventually the roadmap. So for more information about our projects, feel free to visit our website, www.delphior.eu, and please follow our Twitter account, which is delphior@eu. Delphior, yeah, that's the Twitter account. Thank you very much. So and then I give the floor to Ms. Anne Bayat from the European Commission, the Unit of Interactive Technologies. She's the Deputy Head of the unit. The floor is yours. So I'm going to make Kenya as a presenter.
Oops. Good morning, everyone. While Kinga is kindly uploading the presentation, I'm sorry for this slightly difficult configuration, but the camera on my laptop broke and we had to find a last-minute solution. Okay, so my name is Anne Bayat. I'm working with the Commission in DG Connect in Unit G2, dealing with interactive technologies, digital for culture and education. So as you can see, we are dealing with more than education, but all those things are kind of linked. Can you go to the previous one? Stay on the unit, please. Thank you. Because the work that we are doing for culture and in the context of interactive technologies, including virtual reality, for example, can also definitely be applied in education. So more specifically, the work that we are doing related to education, it's about transforming digital experiences and providing education systems fit for the digital area. Digital transformation of society is something that we are all experiencing in many different sectors of our lives. And education is one of those sectors. With the connectivity, the digital capabilities, the mobility of students, and many other things. Next one, please. We have a new commission in place for nearly 6 months now. In our political guidelines and in our speeches, our new president has really insisted a lot on, the fact that we have education is something important. And in the last weeks, she also insisted a lot about the recovery of Europe. But this is what I've been asked to talk to you about in the context of this workshop, is the activities that the Commission has been put in place to fight the current crisis and its consequences. So we are going to have a kind of Marshall Plan for Europe's recovery. It's something that had to be prepared relatively quickly. Next one, please. The European Union has been criticized in many different places during this crisis for not taking action. But I would like you to have a quick look at this slide and realize that I think that this criticism is maybe not extremely fair, because in a difficult time, I think that we try to do the best we could to support the member states and to work together. But of course, there was this natural feeling suddenly to close the borders and to feel very much national, which maybe did not help in certain cases. Anyway, we have a very elaborated EU coronavirus response to the crisis. It goes from supporting research on vaccines, diagnosis, treatment, to putting in place flexible rules for EU to save jobs and companies. We also launched a lot of procurements to be able to buy medical equipment in a time where it was very hard. Do you remember all this story about the mask and the respirators and so on? We have been really, supporting to travel in Europe by providing app and a website, a brand new website since yesterday, explaining, you know, what is the situation in each country when it comes to travel, supporting the tourism, and so on. So we also provided funding through the European Investment Fund. So I think globally it's quite a good coverage of many things that had to be done and that had been done. Next one, please. The amount of money that has been used and proposed is also huge, as you can see on this slide. It comes from various sources and it will be assigned to different programs. I will not go into details here, but I just wanted to show you that we are not just talking about peanuts here. We are really talking about a huge effort to tackle the economic crisis that is going to follow unavoidably what we are experiencing on a sanitary level. Next one, please. As I'm from DG Connect, I will go more into details about things that are linked to digital. There are many different areas, but more specifically, as I said, we have been very active on the front of public health, of the economy, of the travel, of the crisis management, of research and innovation, of digital, and of fighting disinformation. I think those topics have been very high on the agenda, and we are dealing with it. So if we go to the next slide, we will see some examples of things that have been done linked to digital technologies. This is what we are doing in our DG, and this is what I wanted to talk to you about. So one first pillar was about data, artificial intelligence, and supercomputers. Maybe you heard on the news about different things that we have proposed. There is the famous contact tracing application. It's controversial in certain member states, unfortunately. The idea being that this is an app that you download on mobile, and then it keeps track of who you meet, and in case you declare yourself as positive, it can warn the people that they have been potentially in touch with someone who is sick. Of course, there are some privacy issues. I think those were tackled carefully, but there are still a lot of questions and also not enough people downloading this kind of application. It was a good idea, does not seem to materialize much. It's a pity, but okay, it's still there and we are still working on it. There was also a lot of effort on various applications and online tools to deal with containment and how to lift it, you know, to be able, for example, to count the number of people in a certain place so that you can automatically stop people for entering this space. There have been some specific calls for artificial intelligence and robotics to help with the COVID-19 crisis, for example, for disinfecting hospitals or other places. And of course, a lot of work, for example, with supercomputers on treatment and forecasting of the crisis. We have also been rather active on the telecommunication networks and connectivity side. You might also have heard on the news that our Commissioner, Thierry Breton, very early in the crisis, contacted the streaming provider in Europe to be sure that they were reducing the resolution of, you know, our favorite series and movies on the web, so that we could guarantee a decent internet capacity for everyone, because suddenly, of course, we were all using internet at its full capacity. Would it be for leisure, for schools, but also for teleworking? So that's something that had to be tackled as well. Then we also kept on working. This is something we have been doing for quite a while, but this was even more important at this time of the crisis, about the disinformation. Because at the beginning, especially before more concrete actions had been taken by various platforms, you could see plenty of videos explaining you how to treat the COVID-19 with the most bizarre treatments possible. And of course, it does not help if you start trying things which have not proved and you don't go to the doctor and don't follow the rules. And then on the other skills, collaborative working and creativity, of course, there is the work on remote learning and digital skills and best practices. If there is something that this crisis has shown, is that online learning and the use of emerging technologies for learning is with us and will stay. That's something that was already hanging in the air and therefore holds the crisis. But of course, it was obvious that kids at home or students at university suddenly had to follow most of their classes, if not all their classes, online. And This is not going to change. I think gradually schools reopen, but most of the plans still show that this is a limited amount of pupils, so it's limited to a certain amount of time. Universities also plan, for example, for next year, that some of the classes will be online, some will be presential, and so on. So there is still a lot to deal with. And in the unit specifically, we had a couple of activities that were linked to digital education at the times of COVID-19. I'm going to show you 3 slides now with some examples. There are more. I mean, I'm not trying to be necessarily completely complete here, exhaustive, but okay. I mean, I started with Step for All. I think this is obvious. This is thanks to you that we are meeting today. I think that you have an interesting website with many blogs and interviews and insights and articles about teaching in times of COVID-19. Those of you who have not checked that, I really encourage you to have a look. This is really interesting to listen to all those views and to have a better idea. And something interesting as well is that, I mean, there is an online survey, which I was told is still open, despite the fact that on the website yesterday it said it was closing on the 12th of June, but you can still participate. And it's really to try to understand better the challenges and opportunities that this crisis has brought for digital learning in the context of higher education institutions. So all views are very much welcome, because we really need to prepare also. I mean, I don't like to say that, but we don't know what the future brings. And the better prepared we will be if there is a second crisis, the best it is, definitely. Next slide. Another project of ours who has been very active, it's Impact EdTech. Impact EdTech is a European incubator accelerator helping startups and SMEs to turn ideas into market-ready products. So once again, this is a project that started before the crisis with, you know, the goal to really support tech startup and SMEs in the field of education. And they have a first call open, which closed soon, but this first call can already encapsulate ideas specific for the COVID-19. Most probably more dedicated call will come in the future. It's not completely official yet, but I mean, this is another way to tackle the issue, to really try to develop the right solutions to facilitate remote and mobile learning. Next one. And then on the third slide, you have a couple of links on our Europa webpage. I mean, we try to show certain initiatives that we have in the pipeline that could be helpful for teachers and educators during the outbreak of COVID-19. So on those 3 pages, you can find examples of projects, of platforms, of different resources that you can access that can help you, you know, I mean, creating your online classes and understanding better what you can do. So if you want to have a look at things that have been funded by the EU, those are the 3 websites that you can use. So next one. So I'm reaching to conclusion. No, sorry, something important, the Digital Education Action Plan. That's something that has been in place since 2019. The Digital Education Action Plan is the political guidelines, you know, that really gives the European framework under which we are trying to create a digital education area in Europe. But things have changed so much in the last, let's say, 3-4 years, also technically speaking, that this already needs a revision. And of course, I mean, considering the crisis now, part of this revision will be very much I mean, attached to the crisis opportunities and challenges. So we are working hard on it, DG Connect and DG EAC, and hopefully we should have a revised action plan in the 3rd quarter of 2020. I wanted to mention this here because there will be an online questionnaire to consult stakeholders also, probably in the next days online, so I could not put any link unfortunately yet, but that's also something I would encourage all of you to go and have a look and answer, because the more inputs we get from stakeholders, of course, the better this revised action plan will be. So I'm reaching the conclusion now. Next slide. I mean, as I said in the beginning, we are in the middle of digital transformation of society, and it also concerns education, teaching, and homeschooling. What we are experiencing, I believe, is just a fast forward acceleration. So it was already there. The crisis has just accelerated the whole process. So many people knew already that this was the future. Now it's quite clear that this is absolutely necessary. So the question is, how do we exploit opportunities that technologies offer? What should always be reminded is that all those tools and applications and things that we propose should be part of a larger pedagogical approach. So it's not something we do in isolation and then we bump on the teacher. It's really something that needs to be part of a larger picture. And we need to remember to support teachers, students, parents, and organizations dealing with it. Never really focus only on one part of it. So, I mean, what we are aiming to is education for all and everywhere, and at any times, I would add, including during crisis. And I mean, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm very much looking forward to the rest of the listening to your views on the topic.
Thank you very much, Anne. So just to respond to some points that you mentioned about our activities, thank you very much for talking about survey, actually, and I believe most of the experts here have received their surveys already. And in fact, the survey results was closed yesterday, so we received feedback until yesterday. But that's not a problem because we actually have a second round, which will be a more detailed questionnaire, which will be derived from the your excellent answers to the first survey. So stay tuned. We're gonna reach out to you. And then another thing is that of the 3 links where Anne suggested experts to look at all the resources and platforms of the education technology initiatives, we have been following them very closely as the all projects. So we even have news and then we talk about them. And so stay tuned with us so you have more information on that. Okay, we are a little bit behind schedule. Now I will give the floor to Ellen to present our core of the topic today, which is the metrics. So,
hello, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, good.
Yeah, we can hear you. So I just have to go back to this.
Yes, I'll just wait for the presentation to come up and stay. Yes, my name is Alan Third. I work at the Open University in the UK, the Knowledge Media Institute, where I'm a research fellow. The Open University has been doing distance learning for quite some time, since we were founded in the late 1960s. Yes, we've got quite a lot of people who've been working on different pedagogical approaches beyond traditional face-to-face for quite some time. So that's kind of where we're coming from. Now, directly in KMI, we're a technology lab. We've been working on the use of semantics and blockchain in education for some time. And yeah, so that's where we're starting from. So so I don't know if I'm lagging or here we go. We can see the presenter view, Kay, not the, there we go. Thanks.
Some technical problem. So
no,
everyone
it's fine.
should be able to see the slides now.
I don't want to interrupt. That's all. Yes, okay, so today I'll present the first version of the Dell for All Technology versus Education Matrix. So just to talk in terms of context, so this is a map I took from the VRC website, which this is from beginning of April, showing, summarizing, I should say, what restrictions are in place across the EU for various aspects of life. You can see a little block of 6 blocks on each country. The top middle block is about schools, and in nearly every one of them, schools and higher education, I should say, nearly every one of them, the block is red. The schools were closed, apart from Sweden and Latvia, from those that are listed, it seems. Data for the countries, non-EU countries like Norway and the UK are missing, but I believe both of those were red at the time as well, and schools were closed. So this was very rapid, as I'm sure you're all probably painfully aware. There was a very sharp and necessary shift to find ways to maintain education in the absence of the way we normally do it. And this involved quite a strong need, a rapid need to adapt to different contexts, so not being in the same space as your teachers or students or equipment or materials, to involved adaptation to the different tools that are available, what you are physically capable of doing in a what has effectively become an almost completely online learning environment is, of course, if not necessarily, it is limited, but also where it isn't limited, it may well just be different. So one needs to adjust to that. I think a big thing that seems perhaps to come as a surprise to a number of people was the need to adapt techniques. I've seen a number, anecdotally I suppose, I've seen a number of reports from people who are used to teaching face-to-face, for example, suddenly seeming to realize publicly that in fact just delivering a lecture over a video call does not have the same pedagogical effect as it might have face-to-face. People need to actually adapt the teaching and learning technique. And also the goals in what can be achieved, partly to adapt to what is capable in the scenario, but also to deal with the different contexts we find ourselves in. So again, I've noticed, and I think this is a positive thing, I've noticed an increase in focus on, for example, learner mental health, that you necessarily get vocalized that was necessarily being vocalized before, I suppose I should say. So yes, there's been a lot of need to change and adapt things. So Kai, could you next slide? In terms, so this was supposed to be an activity within Dell for All anyway, before the crisis hit. We have, I think, had to, and I think it's been good for us to refocus to some extent on the challenges that have come out of the crisis. So the concept of the technology versus education matrix was to provide a map of different technologies and educational experts and educational context. So looking at, yes, what is being used, who is using it, what they're using it for, and how are they using it in terms of education. And so to set, and this is what I'm presenting here, is the framework for a crowdsourced map of the landscape in digital education with regard to the technologies being used. And I mean a conceptual map, but a geographic one. So how do different technologies relate to different uses in education, different situations in education? And the thing that has come to the fore in response to the pandemic is the question of resilience. So we've seen, in terms of this very forced rapid adaptation, we've seen some things have worked very well and have carried over from contexts people are used to different ones. Some things have not. And an obvious and I think very relevant question then is, what makes either an educational approach or an educational technology, what makes it resilient to these sorts of changing context, as Anne referenced as well. One could possibly say that one could possibly see this as a one-off situation, that this is a very extreme set of events that has brought these things to the fore, and that as the situation gets resolved, these issues will not be important anymore. I don't agree with that. I think, so Anne referenced being prepared for a second crisis. And also the fact that a particular crisis has exposed some difficulties that we have in how we do education doesn't mean they weren't there before, it's just that they've been more highlighted. And I think with coronavirus, with climate change, etc., I think we are going to see more need to be more flexible in how we do things, and I think we probably needed to anyway. So I think it's definitely worth the focus on resilience. How do we build educational processes and infrastructures and technologies that can be adapted from one context to another? Next slide, please. So what we've been doing for the last few months is undertaking an exercise in analysing how do we go about gathering the information needed to construct this sort of map, to construct this this matrix. And in doing that, so we identified what we think are the four sort of main entities, one of which is a little more complex and needs, I think, more attention than the others, and I'll go into that. But obviously we need to talk about technology, not just one individual technology from, say, something developed by us at KMI, but technology types. So we do a lot of work on blockchain-backed certification and micro-credentials. There are a number of other initiatives globally. It's important to extract, well, what's general about these? What are the features of this type of approach overall, and how that can relate to how they can be used. So we talk about actors. Now, actors, really any stakeholder, and we do intend, I'll come back to this, but when I talk about stakeholder, when Del Farrell talks about stakeholder, we really mean that to be as broad as possible. So a lot of people have an interest in education, whether as participants or providers or policymakers or beneficiaries. An awful lot, and I think it's very important to be as inclusive as possible and to incorporate as many perspectives as possible. Activities are, I would see, in terms of actual particular individual, for example, projects, say a research project or commercial activity or a governmental pilot of something, for example, something being done with technology in education. And the more complex entity you're talking about is the idea of a learning context. So it's not, I think maybe a lot of people will look at technology in general or educational technology specifically in terms of, well, here's a list of things that are out there that you can use. And this is, that haven't maybe been trialed and things, but I think it's particularly important to get the value, and it's particularly important in terms of resilience to look at the context in which they've been used. And learning context is not a simple concept. So if we move to the next slide, we have broken it down into a number of different aspects so that make up what we like to call a context in which learning takes place. So we speak about the setting. So the setting could be in a university, it could be in a workplace, in a CPD program, for example, it could be in an evening class or a hobby meeting, it could be in a school, it could be in an extracurricular activity or something that a child does with their parents, for example. A learning setting, where is it happening? Where is learning taking place? Learning activities, so you can, as I'm sure you're well aware, you can divide what the the different aspects of, for want of a better phrase, the overall educational process into different elements, different stages. So learning design, content creation, content delivery, assessment, creation of educational policy. These different types of activity take place that collectively these activities will form what we could call an educational process. I think one of the big things that's different between face-to-face and online pedagogy is the separation between content creation and content delivery, and the idea that these do not necessarily have to be done by the same teams and the same people. If you're talking particularly about video resources, etc., which are more used online, but more useful, then you can focus better and achieve better results if you separate these. Another aspect of learning context is the pedagogical framework being used. So there are different ways of approaching teaching or approaching learning, which to some extent depend on the setting and the participants, etc. But things like learning by doing, or the flipped classroom model, where in fact delivery of knowledge takes place outside of the classroom, and the classrooms are reserved for discussion and analysis and exploration of the consequences and helping learners to understand more. And then the last three sort of different types of stakeholder in a learning context. So what type of learner is it? Is it a child? Is it an adult? Is it someone learning for personal development or for work or for qualification? Teacher type. So again, a lecturer, a tutor, coordinator of a group activity, an employer, all these sorts of things, a parent, and apologies for the sort of catch-all term, but other actor types are very hard to group together, but things like educational policymakers or companies involved in technology development or research labs, etc. So next slide, please. I'll try and be relatively quick. So together with these entities, an analysis of their the properties that they have. So we've built a framework for collecting the data, which will feed into the building of what you'll see as a technology versus education matrix, which the goal is to crowdsource this. We can't ourselves build a comprehensive map of these things, and nor should we. So in collaboration with other projects, such as the impact project mentioned earlier, and also experts such as yourselves and stakeholders and communities in general. So we want to be able to collect data about activities, learning contexts. Next slide. Actors, just a little bio of Alex Beck, who is in the conversation here today, who's part of Dell for All. And next slide. And technology. So, and this is at the generic level of any blockchain certification technology, for example, and what technology readiness level that is at, and what features it has. The features are important for relating to the resilience aspect of things. Next slide. So this is just an excerpt. I think we're all been given a link to the deliverable describing the matrix in advance, and I know there's one in the chat as well that Verena put up a while ago. So collecting these data together to show how generic types of technology, AR, VR for particular goals, like a VR laboratory, what features it has and what settings it has been or can be used in, and their features, including benefits and challenges. And again, the features are important. So if a face-to-face teaching experience involves some interactivity or involves performing tasks with a particular set of objects, then perhaps in terms of resilience, technology that provides interactive simulation of those objects might be something that could be adapted in a more straightforward way than something which doesn't have those features. So we want to be able to map those and identify them. So this is, we've done we've built the framework for collecting the data to build this. We've built a first example based on technologies that we have identified and analysed and know about. Like I say, this is just the first 3 rows of it. The rest is in the document you've seen. And if you go to the next slide, I am trying to sort of, yes, I've got a few more slides to go. So yes, I think in terms of what this can be used for, one of the main hopes we have from it and goals we have from it is that it can be used not just to identify what things, if you're looking for something to use, how can I find what's going on and how who's doing it so I can use it, or who are the experts who know about it, but also how adaptable is it? If you need something that adapts to a situation, that fits to a situation you find yourself in now, ideally we need to model the features that make that possible and allow you to connect those together and translate approaches and technologies across contexts. And this has the ability to be not just technology driven, of we have a new technology, how can we use it? That's exciting, but also the other directions are pedagogically driven. So what are our learning goals? How do we need to implement them based on what we have? I think there's a bit of a tendency to say, oh, we just need more technology or newer technology or more equipment. And that's not necessarily the case. I think often the main thing that's needed are smarter ways of using that technology based on pedagogical knowledge and expertise. So next slide, please. I just wanted to highlight, I said we'd be very broad in terms of stakeholders. So there are to some extent the obvious roles, the teacher or material creator or a researcher or a learner, but also the unseen roles. So yes, parents as teachers has become a high priority thing, but also parents as learners. Parents have had very recently to learn more about how to teach in strange circumstances. Employers as certifiers, all those CPD certificates you get from doing a half-day course at your employer that's in a drawer, and maybe don't need to be or shouldn't be. Technologists for creating content, lots and lots. There are roles that are not necessarily viewed as part of the education process, or are not necessarily seen in the role that they are, can be, need to be focused on. So next slide, please. So we are presenting this today and hopefully have a discussion just now. And by the end of the month, we'll produce a white paper summarizing what we've already presented in the document you were sent, plus incorporating any feedback and thoughts from today and hopefully from the survey that we have. What we're presenting here is a living structure. So it's intended to serve the needs of the community as a whole, not just of the project, and we would like to change, improve and update it to suit what you need and want from it. And yes, this is just version 1, so it's not a fixed finalized structure. We're building infrastructure to support the crowdsourcing and, more importantly, the analysis of the content for identifying best practice. And we want all the way through to be engaging in a dialogue with everyone. So yeah, that's the conclusion of my presentation. So hopefully now we can have a more interactive conversational thing, and I won't need to hear my voice as much. So, thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Alan. So yes, we are only 15 minutes away from the end, so let's go through the questions prepared by Alan. I know that some audience have some Q&A at the end, but we have here an agenda to collect input and feedback on the metric itself. So Alan, if you can start with your questions first. Thank you.
Okay, so yes, so there's some things that would be, from our point of view, would be incredibly good to have input from you on. So I thought we'd pose these questions. I'm not sure whether it's best to go through them all at once or in turn. I guess I'll summarize them all. So in terms of mapping technology to educational use or adapting education to new technologies as they emerge, what sort of factors do you think are most important to know about technological context, educational context, etc., and why do you think they're important? Which feeds into what do you think we're missing Okay, so this is an analysis by a small team. It would be, I'm certain we missed things, and it would be great to know what they are. And if you had, as we are going to build a repository of technologies and educational approaches structured according to this, how would you want to use such a thing, and how could that be best supported? So those are the summary of all of them. Yes, I'd be very, very grateful for your input.
Thank you. So we will unmute the audience, and feel free to speak up on this. If there's no immediate answer, maybe we can refer to the questions from the audience. The one that was.
Hello.
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi. This is Sula from the University of Nicosia. If I understand the first question correct, I think one of the most important factors that as educators we need to be aware of is to ensure that the material that we are teaching has to be at the latest state of the art. These are technologies that are changing continuously. So one of the things that we need to ensure is that the material is up to date, basically.
Yes, there's sort of an particularly with more technological materials, there's sort of an aging factor in the material itself, isn't there, based from when it was created to. Okay, that makes sense. Yes, I could see that. That is something to incorporate. So it's there's a time dimension along probably
Yes.
a number of these aspects. In fact, yes, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, I could see that would be both interesting and possibly difficult to incorporate, but it's important. It
requires a lot of effort on behalf of the instructor to keep the material up to date continuously.
Or at least to know when it's out of date. That might be the best. That's a more reachable goal, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, that's very important. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello?
Are we supposed to just speak up? Or
Yep.
Yes, please.
Okay. First of all, thanks for this talk. Andreas Pippo from Fraunhofer. I would have one comment just before I answer to that, is I still don't understand pretty much what is the purpose of this matrix. So it would be nice to get more into, so maybe you could comment afterwards a few sentences what you think the stakeholders you mentioned would be using this matrix for. And then just to answer some of that, so I think a factor which is what I see at the moment important is to understand the problem the technology is solving in terms of the the learning context that we're in. So what a specific problem for the learner, but also for the teacher it is solving. And also what I haven't seen here is a cost of the technology. So I think this is important for many stakeholders, especially in public education.
Yeah. I am unmuted. Sorry. Yes, I am. Sorry. So in terms of the purpose, so I suppose there are two sides of the purpose. So internally for the Dell for All project, it's what we're structuring our analysis around. So essentially what's out there in terms of technology and in terms of how technology is being used for education and who knows about it and what the evidence is, but also what are from the demand side, what are the needs out there in the educational world that are being met, are not being met, or could be met better or in different or cheaper ways. Externally, there's a sense, I mean, at the heart of it, I actually think the main value I see coming from this is as a something to hang conversations from, if you like. So something to enable us to talk more easily about how we use technology in education, where we're going, how we, like I say, I often think the conversation is just centered around, ooh, new technology, we have to use new technology, or, you know, you have to use my new technology. My technology is wonderful, depending on who's actually talking, of course, but that's not necessarily the most useful conversation to be having. I think it's really that it's really about context of use, and it's about the pedagogy and how really that should be driving everything. How do we use these things better? And I think as well as the sort of base level of, if we have a map of good practice and what's out there and what it can be done, it's handy for people to discover things to use. That's one use for external stakeholders, but also I think supporting this conversation amongst practitioners and experts about how things fit together and how we can best synergize across these things. That would be, I think, quite valuable. So that's what I envisage, but I think it should be quite open. I see the conversation in the question in the chat about a search function in terms of learning settings and benefits to be able to filter and map. That's precisely, yes, as John has put in the response. So it will be a machine readable artifact. Will precisely that kind of faceted search of being able to say, well, I have these contexts and these needs, or I have these technologies. What can I help with? That kind of filtering and narrowing is precisely what we're aiming for. Yeah, and cataloging what works well. It's not just this works or this has been done, but what is there evidence that has worked well.
Something else? In the mapping of the technologies to the actual educational use, do you consider the level of education? Because, I mean, right now with the COVID, we have seen that at all different levels of education, starting from kindergarten to elementary school, high school, tertiary education, everything had to move online using the technologies. Do you deal with these different ages also at the same time, or are you considering only one level?
I think level is a sort of, no, we're considering it, as I think it's crucial. Yes, so the learner type captures that. So what age is the learner? What type of learning are they engaging in? But also, I think there's some element of the learning setting. So if something's a higher education institution, that tells you something about the level it's working in, and also the teacher type. So someone someone who contributes to people learning through informal community activities with a hobby type of thing may be addressing multiple levels at once, and it's quite interesting. I think this is a multi-dimensional. That level is a very multi-dimensional aspect, and I hope the goal is that by breaking down the learner context into this more fine-grained set of attributes, that this allows us some considerable expressivity in handling that. But I would love to know where it will break down and what we can fail to represent so that we can fix it.
Could I just raise?
Can I make a question, a comment?
Point?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it's being, sorry, this is Alan Bruce here. I just wanted, it's in relation to your second question on the matrix, and it's to do with accessibility and in particular universal design for learning perspectives. I'm working in the area of marginalized learners, and I think it's critically important, not just for the access for them, but in the fact that much of the technological innovation has been concerned with those marginalized learners, particularly those who experience disability, for example, visual impairment or hearing impairment. And I wonder to what extent there's been a huge amount of development in this sector, which is of use to the mainstream, not the other way around, Will this be factored in some of the interesting perspectives you're bringing through? I'm talking in particular about UDL and some of the points that come up through that and how they can be factored in to marry with technological innovation.
Again, I would, and this is a hope rather than from the basis of knowledge, but incorporating things like the learning settings, learner types, technological features, actually. So, I mean, I think it's an important aspect. If you're describing a technology and trying to abstract what are its general features, then the things like, for example, so for visual impairment, so things like representing if you like, content translatability, so whether something could go can be presented in an alternative textual format if it's been primarily visual. I know that's a really base level way of talking about it. I'm not saying that's the right way of thinking about it, but actually, yes, you're right. I'm thinking now that that's actually what we have might not be enough to represent that. That's really crucial and important. I want to look into that. Thank you. That's probably the best thing. But yeah, I think it should be flexible enough to represent some of this, but it may be more valuable to pull it out as a primary attribute, because actually, yes, this is almost like, yeah, there's a lot of concerns. There's a lot of aspects of adaptability in that, in fact, isn't there? Yeah.
Can I make a comment, a question?
Sorry?
Can I make
Go
a question, a comment? Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry. I'm from the European Parents Association. I'm a parent. The technology that we have been using in the last 3-4 months has been a quite mature technology. From business perspective, this has been used for the last 10 years or so to avoid travel expenses or so. But now, thanks to a virus, this became part of our normal life, education, communication, and so on. So, and we know the parents most of the time are inclined to invest on something that is going to be stable, differently than children. They are loved to swap from something to something else different, just because that is different. So the question is, from your perspective, all of this that we are experimenting now in our normal life will remain, will be an asset. And so we should be investing in education on this, on the tool. All this will probably go away by the time that the virus will go away. And then all of this will return back to the offices, to a business probably more than now. And so people will go back in communicating in presence, or in the way that we were used before. Thank you.
So I mean, I think I'm at this stage somewhat skeptical at the timescales in which things will just go back to normal. I don't expect they will for at least a couple of years, honestly, which may be pessimistic. I think we're going to see a lot more blended learning going forward. So even, I mean, as we're seeing just now, was places where schools are returning, they're returning in limited ways, or with you know, so many days at school, so many days at home, and a blended approach. So I think this is a sort of ongoing phenomenon. And also, I mean, I think, so right now we're all in crisis mode. So there's you know, we have to do this, we have to switch to this and do it in whatever is the most reachable way. But actually, as we collectively, globally learn more about how to do this sort of thing at scale, you know, I suspect we might end up seeing like permanent adaptations in how we do these things as we get our heads around what can we do well, what can we do better in this way that fits better with people, and what you know, keep the, even in not times of non-crisis, keep the positives going forward. I suspect. I could be wrong.
Okay, thank you very much. I see that also Arya sent a similar question on the parents. I don't know if you have anything to add to the discussion just now, because Claudio also was covering this aspect. Because we are a little bit over time here. We can cover the last.
Yes. With regard to, so it's a repository was organized in a way that parents could easily find their way through and see if it could be useful for them. Yes, I would like that too. That's one of my goals. So I would say I really want this to be accessible to as many stakeholders as possible in a way that is useful to as many stakeholders as possible. And I think parents being a significant one, particularly the way things are just now, absolutely yes. I think making it navigable for parent use is really important and helpful. So yeah, I can say I agree.
All right, thank you very much. Good to have you, and then we will have a series of next events presented by the Delft4All consortium. So we really want to engage with our expert groups and people like you, and stay in touch. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Kinga, and all the consortium partners as well. See you next time.